Now I'm right here next to the microphone.
I've done that like 5 times. All right, everybody. What do you do with all that blood?
Give it away to more.
Interesting. All right. Does anyone take that quiz from yesterday? I think we're good in here. Yeah, everyone. So you just got to record it. I'll get it back. People did very well on it. So I had to grade some last minute quizzes so my aide could put them in. So I'll get them typed in. And so we're starting. So the panic, I'll put that in unit 4, even though it's manifest destiny, because it's after the test. But I really wanted the test on Tuesday because. And today's Wednesday. Did you know that? That means Friday, page 555 to 585 will be due, and hopefully we'll be fighting a war on that day also.
Against Mississippi? Against Mississippi?
No, we're gonna take it over to Mr. Haynes' room. Yes. Okay. The freshman, we could beat them. I think we could beat them, right?
Yeah.
Listen, freshmen push us around. So we need a diversion. So half of you will have to go outside and jump headfirst through his window here. And while they're worried about that, I know there's always somebody. I'll do it. We got a stretcher. We got a stretcher. We got and we got some Cold War shelter candy. So we're fine. We're going to demonstrate them all.
Don't forget the candies.
Candy and shelter.
How would that I just thought of something funny about defenestration, throwing through a window. Did we get to panic of 1837? Yes. What did Biddle do to the money supply? What did he do to money? Yeah, he purposely wanted to create a battery. We're broadcasting this. This is going live, people. Do you want to hear the bagpipes?
Yes.
Scotland the Brave.
Quiet. Come on to my favorite part. Right here. See? Would it be awesome if we had bagpipes in this room now? We'd shut the doors, I would leave, and I'd let you enjoy the bagpipe music. Have you ever been in a closed room with a bagpipe? No. Because you would not have heard me say that. Because you would not have heard it. These actually did come from Edinburgh. Oh! Really close. Okay, so where am I? Did we get here? Oh, so what was it called where they said federal government land can only be paid for in specie? Yeah, specie circular. So we got to here. Did we get to here?
We got the Van Ruins Depression.
Oh, we got the Van Ruins Depression. Maybe. This is.
You're really excited to talk about the assassination.
Oh yeah, we got an assassination too. This is. You guys are just so lucky. So a depression is a time of long-term unemployment. Depression is a time of long-term unemployment. Did everyone hear that? A depression. Now here's the thing about this. This had never happened before to so many people. Americans, because it would also be in Britain. Every place that began the Industrial Revolution had this panic, and its effects would be worldwide, because there was also a speculative boom in Britain. There was something different, but it was worldwide. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people did not rely upon wages for their survival. More and more people than ever before in 1837, when they lost their jobs, what happened to them? They potentially starved, had nothing, kicked out of their homes, It was a catastrophe like no one had ever seen. It shook the United States to its very fiber. It was unprecedented. Sure, there had been financial panics. Sure, there had been bad times for shops or businesses or farms. And there had been famines and other terrible situations, but never like this. And the other thing about this is a panic and a depression, which was relatively rare before this, is endemic in capitalism. It always happens. There'll be a time of a boom, and then a bubble will form, and people think they're going to get rich, and it'll go on forever, and it will bust, and there'll be a bust, and then a horrible depression. It's a boom-bust cycle, and it will happen time after time after time after time. And we'll talk about how they happen. I'll tell you about the economists who figured out how they happen. But to this day, this is the biggest debate between more liberal and conservative economists who want some kind of capitalistic system, but have to deal with this. So, did I show you this picture? So let's move on to the next one. So Jackson's going to be blamed for this. So this is okay, I know it's a donkey, but they would have said it was a jackass, a mule. And that's Jackson. And just going through and bucking through. And this represents the various states being held together by the Bank of the United States. So this is a pro-Whig, pro-bank cartoon. And saying Jackson's a jackass. Out of control, this dumb mule-like or donkey, essentially. And then there's the Kinderhook Fox, as he was sometimes called, the wily politician, Martin Van Buren. And that's supposed to be William Henry Harrison. I don't know what he's saying, Yankee Doodle Dandy, okay. And here's the world looking on, ready to jump on. Oh, and these are the pack of hounds that are working now for Jackson to clean up the mess. This cartoon would become pretty common, showing in some way Jackson as a jackass, Jackson doing this, as an unthinking mule that you have to hit, or a donkey. And the Democrats would take this and say, who has a donkey? Working people, farmers. And so they took this, mocking Jackson as a jackass, to we will be represented by this working person's donkey. And that's how the Democratic Party got the symbol of the donkey, from that cartoon. We'll get to it. That's going to be right after the Civil War. Same cartoonist who did Santa Claus. We draw one. I'll show you that cartoon too. So we also have to get to something called Jacksonian economics. And this is more of a philosophy than a real economic policy. Laissez-faire economics. Hamilton economics, that conservative economics, use the power of government through taxation and direct aid and laissez-faire to funnel money to the wealthy. Not Jacksonian democracy. It was more of this concept that economics, how people deal with scarce resources, that is political and should be decided by the people, aka democracy. Because governments create the money supply, governments create the banking system, governments make the laws about contracts, about everything from theft to fraud. Governments decide if there'll be monopolies or not. Government decides working conditions. The people decide this, and therefore it should not be left to those in the search of profit. Now, how you get there, they're not really sure yet, but we're coming to it. So it's come from the basic idea that capitalism is creating vast inequalities, and government is basically almost always done to help capitalists, and the fear of monopolies. This should go back to, remember, the foundation of the United States. The Boston Tea Party was about monopolies. And then fearing large amounts of debt, and what debt does to people is capture people. It's a trap you can't get out of. And trust me, you'll know what that's like down the road. College and get a college loan. You'll know what it's like. You buy a car and get a loan, you know what it's like. There's vast elements of truth to that. And they really feared speculation. That idea that get rich quick schemes, mostly done by those with wealth, taking advantage of the system and the banking system to get rich. Now, let's be clear about it. Jackson did not necessarily help the situation by some of the things he did. Also, believing in hard money. They thought hard money meant specie, gold and silver. Jackson thought if you get rid of paper currency, that would tone down speculation and allow for the common man to survive. Now, down the road, those who kind of get their roots in Jacksonian economics would realize that's completely 100% false. It doesn't work that way. And boy, will the world find out when after 1860s, 1870s, something called the gold standard, this economic financial system based upon gold. And it would turn out to be an unmitigated disaster. Unmitigated. But this was just a logical idea, a false logical idea that, oh, just limit the amount of money, though farmers will, or the common man will get the land and become farmers. And government for the common good. In fact, this is in his second inaugural address. You don't have to write this down. I just want to give this idea. You have to write down government for the common good. But we all must have shared values, shared responsibilities. We're all in this together. The common good. So we can't govern for the sake of a few. That's why his rhetoric would be relatively pro-union, even though his actions weren't necessarily pro-union. Life is complex. And this idea would become the basis for liberal economics at the end of the century. You get the Henry George, property tax, a few things like that. But you really start seeing it with the populist movement in the 1890s. Really start seeing it. And the progressive movement in the early 20th century. Not 100%. So, like the most famous president, the first American president who actually had a program to go along with this would be Theodore Roosevelt. And then be most personified by a little bit Woodrow Wilson, but Franklin Roosevelt would be a successor to this idea. And Harry Truman, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson. So, oh, and this picture shows the fight that Jackson's fighting for us. He's fighting against the well-trained Biddle with all the money and power behind him. Here's Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, two prominent Whig politicians. She represents wealthy, and she's carrying port, which is kind of a kind of a thick, heavy wine that was known for very wealthy people drinking. And yet, who's on Jackson's side? The Kinderhook Fox, Martin Van Buren. He represents kind of like militia, that kind of like average people. Here's a frontiersman drinking old Kentucky whiskey, meaning that's what commoners drink. And how do we know he represents democracy? We all see it, right? What's he wearing? Yeah, he's wearing a cat on his hat. There's a bunch of pictures with guys with cats on their hat. And I agree. It's kind of awesome. Yeah. That's supposed to be a very fancy hat. She sprouted. So, Richard Lawrence in 1835 would also be the first man to ever try to assassinate a president. Now, no one ever thought presidents would be assassinated. There were no guards. Jackson would always take a walk every morning with a friend, cabinet members. It wasn't a big deal. In fact, there'd be nobody guarding the president. Nobody especially assigned to guard the president until after 1901, even after Lincoln was assassinated. He would have soldiers around him in areas where they might feel he's in danger, but anybody would assassinate the president. Why? And it's so weird to think about today. Back then, you could knock on the door of the White House and go ask to see the president. And people would do that all the time. Once again, that seems so weird. You should try. Climb over the fence and knock on the door. And Richard Lawrence had two pistols. These are flintlock pistols. And he was going to go, his plan was to use these pistols and assassinate Jackson. He had been following Jackson for about a year, and he had told everybody, and this is obviously true, that he was actually Richard III, the rightful king of England. And if Jackson was out of the way, Martin Van Buren would become president and make him king of England. I mean, this is so obviously true. Yes, he thought he was Richard III. So he's got to get rid of Jackson so he can become king of England. He walked up to Jackson while Jackson was taking his morning walk, and literally just a few feet away, like this, pulled out his pistols, 2 pistols, a single shot flintlock pistols. And everyone's like, ah, attack. Felt like they were there. And he pulled the trigger, hammer came down, nothing. Didn't fire. Fired the second one. There's a little fizzle in the pan, but the powder did not go through to the barrel and fire the gun. That's called a flash in the pan. Just a little flash, but the pistol didn't go off. Looking back at it, when they picked up the pistols, they looked at it and said there should have been no reason they didn't fire. No reason at all. But for some reason, neither pistol fired. By then, Jackson recovered. He was the first one to recover. Everyone was like this, looking back. And Jackson, once that happened, he grabbed Lawrence and started beating him with the cane, threw him down, and nearly beat him to death. I like this guy. Hey, what's up? Ooh. So, yeah, he nearly killed Richard Lawrence. And that was the first attempt at an assassination of the president. And he's like, why did you do that? And he starts shaking him after they took the cane out of his hand. And the beaten Lawrence would eventually be taken to federal court, DC's federal, and he would announce to the jury and the judge, I should be judging you. You are at fault. It took the jury 5 minutes to find him guilty by reason of insanity. And he would spend the rest of his life in an asylum. The first person in a federal court to be found not guilty by insanity. That's the first assassination attempt. When will be the next assassination attempt?
Lincoln, 1860.
Many Lincoln ones. But the big one will be the one that actually.
Oh.
Then Garfield. Then McKinley. And that's when they decided they better find someone to guard him. They actually kind of did after Garfield, but after McKinley it became more serious. I'll tell you how that happened down the road. All right, a couple of things we have to get to really fast. First off, while Jackson was still president for 11 years, Congress would vote themselves a gag rule. And this is supposed to represent Southern tyranny. You notice the ears like a jackal. And what they said is no debate on petitions, no debates or petitions on slavery. I did not finish this. In Congress. In Congress. They voted to not accept any debate. You could not mention the word slavery in Congress. For 11 years. Who wanted to unify the South to protect slavery and failed? I'm saving my voice, but it was Calhoun, yes. This was a litmus test. So he could prove if you were a true Southerner, regardless if you're a Whig or a Democrat. That's what a litmus test is. Yes or no question. Prove what you are. And so for year after year, you could be punished for this. This blatantly violates the First Amendment. Also, starting with the Jackson administration and through much of the next 20 years, they censored the mail to make sure that no abolitionist material. And this is one of the things I told you earlier. The system of slavery, regardless if there are slaves in your area or you're a slaveholder or not, it deprives people of their liberty. Slave societies cannot allow free speech by anybody for fear of slave rebellion. And yes, Jackson supported this. Jackson was a slaveholder. That's why we have to say, Jackson is such an interesting character in American history. He so much defines our idea of democracy. And he saved the Union with nullification. Then we have Indian removal. And then we have the blatant defense of slavery. And then we have fighting for the common man against a corporation like the bank, which was using its power, but doing a really bad job. He's a complex character. So we're jumping right to this. Let's get to it. Manifest Destiny. You've been waiting for this picture. She's supposed to be kind of running. Manifest Destiny. This path to go west, it's Thomas Jefferson. And there are This manifest destiny means this. It is our destiny. It is it is ordained that the United States will be, and this is what we have to get. The United States will be a continental power, sea to sea. It will be ours. The United States will be continental. The United States will go, or transcontinental, sea to sea. That will be our territory. It is ours. And that really goes back to that, what do you call it, that intense love of your country because it's your country? Remember they started saying American? It's our continent. We own it. Oh, sure, other people might claim it and actually live there, but we don't care. And so the big reason was threefold: to spread American civilization. That's that very nationalistic idea now that the United States, because of its ideas of capitalism, of democracy, this new market about being what an American is something that not only people want, but it's our duty to spread. It's almost evangelical. So it has almost a religious nature to it. There's something special about Americans. And I should add this, wherever Americans go, they take that idea with them at this era. When they leave the United States and they go to, what country was this? That's Mexico. They bring the flag with them. When they go to Oregon, which was either British or American by 1840, they brought the flag with them. They took their ideas of America with them. So here is a great, one of the most famous paintings from this era called Manifest Destiny. And that's Lady Liberty. That's Columbia. I'm sorry, Lady Columbia. That's Columbia. We showed her a picture before, and she is going west. Of course, the way I should have reversed it because she's actually now going east, but west is that way. Should reverse that. Should I reverse it real quick? Yeah. Just imagine. Shut your eyes and imagine she's going the other way. Does that work? Ah, the power of positive thinking. But here's what it is. She is bringing civilization west. So look, the light of civilization and progress. You see a city, technology. What's this wire? Telegram. Gotta let me know there are people there. It surprised me. Good. So, back to this. Here's the line of civilization. What line is this for? What is this? Telegraph. Yeah, telegraph. This is pre-electricity. And you'll notice something. The light is overtaking the darkness of the savage West. And she is bringing civilization. It starts with mountain men and prospectors, farmers, settlers right here, then wagon trains, and then more technology. And you see, oh, and then here's farming and agriculture. And you see what they're replacing? Not only darkness, American Indians are being replaced. Uncivilized and savage. It's horrific prejudice to justify taking the West. You're a bison, fleeing. That's what it means. The light of civilization overtaking the dark. It's a great picture. Great as it were, really tells a lot. It tells you all the attitudes you need about the feeling they had. We have to watch cartoon because of this. Next, this was obviously also to open up trade, fur trade. You will be back. Yes. Okay. That's not paper. And trade with the various tribes, but also get the harbors here for trade with China. China was just about ready to be opened up for exploitation. Okay. Brutally opened up. You might have heard of it, called the Opium Wars. And land. that never-ending desire for land, that American dream to become a small, independent farmer, but also land westward for diffusion. Diffusion means spreading what out? Yeah, slavery, and spread it out. So this is also to protect slavery. We're going to take this land, and yeah, there are people living there, but we want it, and we will brutally take it. So that's manifest destiny. And the first citizens of the United States to really go into this area of the West in large numbers, and not that many. We dubbed them the mountain men. Most of them were actually traders. They have the reputation of going out there and hunting and trapping, but most of them would just set up and trade with the various tribes. And the trade was called the carriage trade. What, pray tell, is the carriage trade? That's what rich people in London and New York would wear as they rode around in their fine carriages in town. And what did they wear? Beaver felt hats, which were popular all the way back to King Philip's War in 1676. And the trappers would get this round thing and ship these back in basically round pelt, scrape off the hard outer fur, that nice felt warm hat. And those were the first ones. There's a lot of romantic stories, very nostalgic. Most of them are kind of made up. Mostly they were just traders. They would go west and set up forts all over, into private trading forts. The most famous in Montana is Fort Union. It's right on the North Dakota-Montana border, where the Yellowstone and the Missouri run together. That's what it looks like today. It's run by the Park Service. And they whitewashed it so people could see it for miles. They did this back in the 1830s. And the fort would be used up until about the 1870s. If you go there today, it's another one of those they try to operate like it's 1850. It's really cool. It's a very neat area. And then there's a U.S. Army fort that was built after the Civil War called Fort Buford. It's like right off over here. And if you go there, literally all this hill, all the way, I would have took more, widen out this, took a more wide angle. It's hammerhead oil wells for miles. Just goes on forever. And has anyone been there? It's a little out of the way, but it's a really cool area. You drive along the Yellowstone. It's really pretty dry. And Fort Union would be one of the most important of these fur trading forts. But in 1840, literally just boom, the carriage trade changed. They didn't want beaver anymore and saved the beaver. Literally overnight. And ended the mountain men, just boom, gone. The carriage trade went to something else. I already kind of hinted at it when I said China. They went from beaver felt hats to what kind of hats? What? Someone said it, what? Silk. Yeah, silk hats from China. It's no coincidence that silk hats became really popular, and within a decade, Britain and France are attacking China to try to force them to open up free trade and exploit it, called the Opium Wars. Literally in a decade. And yes, the US would be involved on the side of the British. So, this will be called by Americans as the empire upon the trail. We're going to spread American empire westward along the big trails into the west to give the United States a claim. So Lewis and Clark gave this claim, but now the trails would go basically as quick as possible over the Great Plains and Mountains and get to either California or Oregon. But the most famous trail would be the Oregon Trail, a 6 to 7 month journey from Independence, Missouri, which it's Kansas City, Missouri. And there's a spot you can go there where it says the Oregon Trail began. But here, overland, dips into Mexico and into territory that was claimed by both the U.S. and Britain. To here, there's a California cutoff. The Santa Fe Trail will go down into here, Spanish Trail into what's going to become Los Angeles. But this is the most important trail. I don't know. I know what you're talking about. We might get to that. So, 250,000 immigrants. 250,000 immigrants would go into 20 years before the Civil War. about almost half would go by water. They'd go around South America, Argentina, or a very common route would be go down to Nicaragua, take the cut across and then go up. But still, over 100,000 west. And the Panic of 1837, seeing what happened there in the 1840s, that would stimulate people going. We don't want to be caught if another panic hits. And so you see a kind of the increase of people going westward, but then you'll notice the big ones. Why would they have these big spikes there? Yeah, the gold rush. Yeah, California gold rush. And this is Nevada and Colorado gold rush. Montana is just off that. Montana, a little smaller, being right about there. And so this manifest destiny would be promoted. There's going to be a real burst of romantic art about this. I showed you another one. You don't need to write this down. I showed you at Hudson River School earlier, and how they drew these just dramatic shots of the West. And here's the Oregon Trail. This is from 1869, and Bierstadt had never been west of New York, but he drew this amazing painting. It's a really cool painting, but into bringing the light, bringing the civilization. Very dramatic art. The first paperback books in American history would be after the Civil War, and the most popular stories about the West. The first motion pictures would be about the West. In fact, the most popular movies would be Westerns until the 1960s. The first most popular television shows were about the West. So this is a really big part of the American romance. And so on Saturday morning, I would watch this kind of thing. Do you want to see this? Let me turn it up a little bit. And this reality. No one. Right? Pretty much This is Apollo 17, the last one. So that's why that the moon was very fresh in people's mind. How many people have landed on the moon? At least they want us to believe this. 12. Yeah, 12.
Why was the moon bigger than the planet?
Huh?
In the final shot, the moon was bigger than the planet.
Yeah, that's science. So I remember that as a little kid. It's not the reality of exactly what happened. I love Gavada without a fuss. Yeah, it kind of, it's a lot of propaganda. A lot of propaganda. It's one of those things that's not necessarily good or bad unless you don't know it's propaganda. Here's the Oregon Trail. Here's them arriving in the Willamette Valley. And that was the goal of the Oregon Trail. And so it's going to leave the United States claim right here. The safest route was into Mexico, then up. This was a more dangerous cutoff, but it saved you weeks. And there were certain spots along the way. Like if you could get to the Chimney Rock in Nebraska by June, you're in pretty good shape. Then Independence Rock is where pretty much it turns into a gumbo desert. And that's like the last, okay, now it gets really hard. And certain spots, if you made it, the Dalles, okay, that was a spot you can now use and sail down to Columbia. Those are all like little spots you can make it. It took about 6 to 7 months. About 10% didn't make it. A third would turn back. What kind of people went? You had to have money. You had to have money. You had to afford the wagons, the supplies. I mean, have you played the game Oregon Trail? You got to have money, yeah. And a couple things I'll show you real quick. That's Chimney Rock in Nebraska. In the 1970s, about 2/3 of it fell down. It used to be a lot taller. So I was relatively young when I first saw it, and it was really tall. Now it looks like that. And that's one of the prairie schooners, a wagon, and there's no shocks. They rarely rode. You wanted to walk because they would actually get seasick on it because it would bump so much, or the equivalent of seasick. And a pretty rough ride, so you basically walked. And once again, that should get back to one important thing I've mentioned before. They were kind of a different breed, weren't they? We're going to walk to Oregon. It's like, we know it's tough, but here we go. Yeah.
Like trails on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, just trail. It'd be laid out. There'd be, huh?
Like who first made the trail?
Who first made them? Oh, well, they'd be made by a number of different people, but the United States Army would actually go through. They went through at least up to the border of the United States, and they actually kind of surveyed it and laid out the trail on high ground. But then once it left into Oregon, it was just by pathfinders who would go through, basically working for somebody else who would lay it out, cut it out. The Army went through it, and they would try to lay the treaty up as on high ground. I know that's harder, but the water washes away. If you do it on low ground, the water will rush down and make it to a trench. So, but that's, yeah, it was a number of different pathfinders. And it literally was kind of a wagon rut. Here are a couple of things where okay, it did something on this screen now. I don't know how I do this. All right, give me a second, pros.
What?
Give me a sec, everybody. So at Independence Rock, they would stop at Independence Rock and they would use axle grease or carve in their names to show they've been there. It was like, we made it here by July. The hardest part of the trip is coming. I hate this computer.
Can we put there? How accurate is Yellowstone? Or like the part that comes.
What Yellowstone? Remember?
Do you know?
Oh, I haven't watched.
Oh.
I have no idea.
What's the date?
Kevin Costner's in it, and I despise Kevin Costner.
Oh.
If anybody, yeah, if anybody watches that show, I really worry for you, because Kevin Costner is an evil, horrible influence on society.
I don't know, my character is too.
That's on you. Yes. Huh? Go to the bathroom? Why did you ask when I was there doing that? Quick run, quick. So, there's a couple of examples of a prairie schooner, and this is actually the 1860s and 1870s, but it'd be crammed in there with, and you had to carry, you know, about 1,000 pounds of food and everything else. They're actually kind of remarkable things because the wagon's only about this wide. So to pack everything in there is just an amazing thing. This is west of Independence Rock. You can see how dry and terrifying that must have been. And only water they would find would be brackish, salty, like alkaline it's called. This is Independence Rock, so State Park in Wyoming. I don't know why it's not a national park, but all over the names are carved in. And it's really cool to see it because you can almost kind of sense just how proud they were. Regardless of the implications of this, it's still like, we made it. Look what I did. And he wants you to know, I did this because it was such a difficult journey. Yes, there'll be implications for the people who live there. You know, we have to see the big picture on this. And that's just a little bit west of Independence Rock, and that's about 15 years ago. But that's when it starts going down the hill and the water starts washing it out, you can still see the wagon ruts from the Oregon Trail. In spots where they're so dry. So that's how narrow they had to be. Had to be kind of a harrowing trip. In some areas they had to walk the mules down and hold or kind of use pulleys to get the wagons down. It was really harrowing. And can you imagine the food they had? Can you imagine the food they had to eat? Let me give you an example of the kind of food they had. I mean, this is all they had. Oh my God. That might be the most gross thing I've ever seen. Slim Jims, cheese whiz.
That looks really good.
You know what that is telling? You know what food that would be? That would be, I'm tired of my stomach. I am bored with my stomach. I want it gone. Who likes Slim Jims? Vague petroleum-based meat products. Okay. So, yes, there is a game called Oregon Trail. Who has played the game Oregon Trail? It's very realistic. You can play it free online. And you can travel the trail. This is the map, and it has all the spots. Leaving from Independence. It's actually has some things that are accurate, has some things that are not quite as accurate. So there's like Fort Kearny in Nebraska, one of the forts along the way named after Stephen Kearny. There's crossing one of the Blue River a little bit further west, Chimney Rock. Now, of course, you can get cholera. You made it to Oregon, or what's the worst case scenario? You died of dysentery. Yeah, they have snake bite. It's kind of a funny game. Huh? Dysentery. It's called amoebic dysentery, and it's an amoeba that's found in fecal matter. And so if you eat water that's tainted by this amoeba will cause basically intense lower intestinal distress, where you have uncontrollable diarrhea, and you basically die of dehydration.
So what's your tongue?
It's beyond horrendous. Beyond horrendous. Let me tell you about the Battle of Agincourt. Moving on. That's a very pleasant dysentery story. Moving on. Well, a group that came a little bit later would be the Church of Latter-day Saints, or also known as the Mormons after the Book of Mormon. And we have to mention them because a combination of, we are in the West and they have such massive influence on the West. And it also ties in with the Burned Over District, the Industrial Revolution, because they all came from this. And they started in the burnt over district. We mentioned, you read about them before. And that is Joseph Smith, who, as you can see right here, he had said he discovered upon plates essentially a new gospel to the Bible, known as the Book of Mormon. This is actually printed, I love this copy, 1830. So this was one of the early printings of this. And it's, yeah, this is a very rare one. And they have this printing in a couple places in Salt Lake City. And one of the main elements, and they are not alone on this. This was not something that this religion created. This is something that was big in the Second Great Awakening, that there'll be a restoration of the true God, the true church, the true leaders of the church, and a second coming of Jesus. And this was a big part of so many different religions. And what were they called? I mentioned it before. Millennialism. The idea that the judgment day is coming. We talked about that with the Millerites. You remember I told you about getting on the roof? I mean, there's a similar elements to all of these things that came out of the Second Great Awakening. And the Mormons were certainly in that realm, especially early on, before 1860, 1870. Really this apocalyptic faith. And Smith talked about creating a, theo means religious, so a religious democracy. And starting the first church, 1830, Palmyra, New York, go to Ohio, and then especially other Christians and people who lived in cities, they would go, because his idea was they would all come together. They would flee to, at first Kansas, and then back, I'm sorry, Missouri, back to Kansas, then back to Missouri, then eventually to Illinois. And I put on Ohio, Missouri, but the big one would be Nauvoo, Illinois. And Nauvoo, Illinois, it's a really cool town. It's very historical, and whether or not I am not a Mormon, but I love the history. I love going there, and it's organized as a national park, but also known by the church, and I really like how they do it. So I like the history of it, even though there'd be some elements that would be rather unpopular for the people who were not Mormons there. But this is their Zion, and the Zion in early church was all the Mormons should be together in one spot. There's Zion. And eventually that would become Utah, and that's why it's so much to be called Zion. Because there's a Zion National Bank in Nauvoo and Salt Lake City. But they would eventually take over the city and the city government. We'll finish this tomorrow. Sound good? Sound good? Everyone happy? Oh, so I'm going to show you something. The school blocks your ability to play Oregon Trail at school.
You're kidding me.
Oh no, I actually shut it down. But I did find, and remind me tomorrow, if it still works, maybe we'll play a couple minutes of Oregon Trail. Sound good?
I
got elbow room. Elbow room, people. Elbow room. Gotta get me some elbow room. It's the Western bus. Oh yeah, you're gone. We'll see you then Monday, right? No big deal. You'll catch up now. Sure. Oh, that's cool. I like that. Have you been there? That's awesome. You know where in the Philippines?
Only not giving us what?
That's really cool. Gonna take a look. I don't know if it'd be so cool after about week 4.
Maybe not.
No, I think it would be kind of neat. Say it again.
Yellowstone.
Yeah, so I went to.
Not giving you cookies. You have 0. And of course, he decides to do that right as basketball season starts. I know. That every time we're gone, he's gonna make us go.
It's not done.
Like writing essays on the bus in the dark. That's what I did last year. Last year, I would get my
Looks really good. And and then these would be it. You know what your why would be. Okay, so what is something that ties this capitalism and multi-layer? And think about in terms of, is it, are the economic changes, political changes? So say, doctors in industrial revolution, is it economic, political, social? Which one of those? Economic, political, social. Or what? Yeah. So put down great economic change. And so you can always, and you tie it all back to the economic change of the industrial revolution. Looks good. That would be good. You're gonna read it, you're gonna do 2 paragraphs. So what you're gonna do is this, you're gonna do your opening. Just pick each one of your bottom paragraphs. Sound good? When you say oh homie, that's when elbow room, huh? Oh yeah, go. Elbow room.
This is my last period for church.
What's that?
This is my last period today for church.
Where are you going?
Indianapolis.
Huh?
Indianapolis.
Why are you going to Indianapolis? Did you tell me about this before? You did, I thought so. I'm losing my mind.
Yeah.
Someday you'll be old and senile. Yeah, Indianapolis, that'll be cool, now I remember. And you'll be back on Monday? That'll be fun, that'll be really cool. You fly in then, you fly out this afternoon? And you know, you make it, I know you get stuff, yeah. What did it say? Ooh, I just missed that. It should be 5. That'd be a heck of a lot of pages. And someone's already read. A lot of it. All right, everybody, good news for all of you. It's Wednesday. We are getting so close to next Monday. Not just Monday. Don't we love Mondays? Everyone loves Mondays. What is the only bad thing about Mondays? It ends. Thank you. Mondays end. What's the only good thing about Friday? The weekend will be over like that, and it'll be Monday again. Yes. Yeah, there's a movie on. Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. It's going to be at the Myrtle Boy. Some beet skin.
I don't know where he's from, but.
So I'm going to find out if it's good. But I think it's good after the good. It's like 3 hours long. It could be really good. We watched Waterloo in Western City, didn't we, last year? Did you like that? People are trying to. It's at the 3rd time people have snuck up behind me. Oh yeah, I gotta tell you more good news. You want to hear even the best news of it all? We are so close to limbo. We are so close to limbo month. December is limbo month. When is? All December?
No, all of
December.
All of
Your poor mom. When's your birthday?
Friday.
This Friday, but that's not limbo month.
No,
But it's almost limbo month and it's almost.
Okay, I'll go with that. So you better start working your back. The expectation is you'll be in a limbo under this desk.
What about those?
Do you guys even know about limbo month? Oh, you'll find out about limbo month. You will be limboing. Yes.
What if we have a disadvantage?
Huh? We don't make excuses. A good carpenter does not blame their tools. They make it work. Yes. You have time?
Not really.
So,
Yeah, bro. He said he was doing the bar.
Why
But then
did
he
you
was
not?
supposed to get a city council. I didn't want to go to Texas. Or like the Texas. I told both my advisors. Maybe like mom Texas.
all right, everybody. Do you want the good news? I already told you the good news. It's nearly Limbo month.
Even more good.
We've lost something. Everybody look around. No. Don't bog me down with details. You want to see a creepy picture of a goat? That's all I'm going to show you. Thank you. You're a good man. All right. So, did we get to this?
We got to Van Bruin's depression.
Van Ruin's depression. Who wanted to create a depression by limiting the money supply?
Biddle.
Yeah, Biddle did that. Yeah, Biddle wanted